Good morning and welcome back to ADR 19. Firstly, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the people of the Kulin Nations on whose land we gather today and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. It's a pleasure today to be able to introduce Professor Jon McCormack, who's the founding director of SensiLab here at Monash. SensiLab is a creative research space that brings together researchers from a diverse set of backgrounds, exploring the untapped potential of emerging technologies. Jon's work spans multiple disciplines, that of art, design, technology, computer science, and he's been a recipient of numerous awards, both locally and internationally. And these awards are both in the fields of computer science as well as in creative endeavours and artistic work. Highlights of those are the Eureka Prize for Innovation in Computer Science and the Lumen Prize for Digital Art. And Jon is currently an ARC Future Fellow working on a project which advances the integration of the digital and material in design. So please join me in welcoming Professor Jon McCormack.
Thanks so much, Roland, and thanks everybody for coming. I'd also just like to acknowledge the land on which we're gathered and pay my respects to the elders, past, present and emerging. It's a great pleasure to be here today. I've provocatively titled my talk, Design Without Designers, to talk a little bit about emerging technologies in the area of design, but to look back historically and philosophically on the idea of things designing without a human designer being involved. So I want to start at a kind of turning point in Western philosophy. Everyone's familiar with Descartes, I guess. Maybe you mightn't be familiar with something that's become known as his dictum. He said, his original words were along these lines: there must be at least as much reality and perfection in the cause as in the effect. And another way of phrasing that is that no design can exceed the knowledge and imagination of the person who designed that thing. So he was very sure about this because he was looking at causality and the sort of relationship between the human mind and the built and constructed world. And for hundreds of years, this was believed to be true. It was just taken as given, a doctrine, that anything that someone designed had to have material, intellectual knowledge put into it, but that knowledge couldn't exceed the imagination of its designer. There's another really interesting turning point too. John Locke's, what's now become known as his cosmic pyramid, but John Locke was very famous philosopher and thinker, and most famous for the lecture that he delivered that said that the mind at birth is a blank slate later filled through experience. The whole idea that human experience was the thing that shaped thinking. And a lot of his writing and his thoughts have been analysed, and one way of expressing that in a very succinct and perhaps slightly misleading way is this, what's referred to as the cosmic pyramid. So Locke was very much of the idea that the world was constructed in a top-down way. So there was God at the top, God made mind, mind made design, design ordered things from chaos, and chaos came from nothing. So this is a very comfortable and sensible worldview at the time, and it's certainly the one Descartes had as well. It wasn't until Darwin came along and provided an explanation for how the great diversity of designs emerged in all the species of life on Earth. And certainly he wasn't the first person to think about this. There's a long lineage of thinkers who were concerned about the idea, not that they were seeing a whole lot of different ranges of plants and animals on the Earth, but also that they were digging up fossils and finding animals that no longer existed. And they were wondering, well, what happened to these animals? Where did they come from? And why do we encounter this incredible diversity of life in terms of the design, the physical structure, the neurological structure, the biological structure? So Darwin and, of course, his contemporary, who's often forgotten and written out of history, Alfred Russel Wallace, came up with the theory of evolution. I'm not going to turn this into a biology lecture, so I'm assuming everyone knows what that is. But what they did, which it still has huge ramifications today, was to invert this pyramid. So rather than the pyramid being top-down, the pyramid got shifted to being bottom-up. So out of nothing comes chaos. From chaos, the universe orders itself. From order comes design. From design comes mind. And from mind comes God. So this was a huge change in the way that people thought about design because it considers intelligence as an effect rather than a cause. So rather than the causation going from top to bottom, it goes from bottom to top. And some people still have a lot of trouble accepting this even today. But it's, scientifically there's no question about evolution as fact. I'm going to talk about machine intelligence a lot, but I also wanted to talk about this device, the mechanical Turk. So the origins of people thinking about devices that had intelligence dates back to the history of mechanical automata, particularly in the Western canon in particular. So this device was very popular in the 18th and early 19th century. It was a device that was supposedly a mechanical chess player. So this would be brought into the parlours of Europe. The owner would place the pieces on the chessboard. The pieces would mysteriously move as if by some kind of spirit. And it was supposedly a mechanical chess-playing machine. It was called the mechanical Turk. It turned out it was actually fake. There was actually a really good chess player sitting inside who was small enough to fit inside the box and was manipulating things and had a duplicate board underneath. But people thought for the first time that there was this idea of a machine that could actually do something that only a human could have done before. So these are the sort of first inklings that people started to have about the idea that someone could make something that outperformed the person who designed it. But the key point really comes in the 1950s, so just at the edge of when digital technology started to become available. But it didn't come from computer science, it came from cybernetics. So William Ross Ashby is a very famous cybernetician, and he wrote this very famous paper and submitted it to the British Journal of Philosophical Science in 1951. And he asked the question, can a mechanical chess player outplay its designer? So he asked two really important questions and remembered the dictum of Descartes. To what extent is the machine restricted by the limitations of its designer? And how much work full of design, how can a work full of design build itself up without a design and without a builder? So this was the first time that someone was challenging the predominant line of thought that goes back to Descartes in hundreds of years. And of course, he met with a lot of resistance. So there were a whole lot of scientists who replied and said, this is ridiculous, you can't be serious, it's impossible to build a machine that can do something that does it better than the designer who made it. But of course, it turns out, if we fast forward through history, in the early 1990s, IBM built a computer specifically designed to play chess. It beat the world champion chess player. And now, if you have a phone or a watch, it can beat any human on Earth at playing chess. So playing chess is a pretty easy thing to beat the best humans at. And it's been capable, that's been known for decades. Of course, playing chess is very different than designing. But another kind of breakthrough in the way of thinking about design without a designer comes from Richard Dawkins, who published this book in 1986, The Blind Watchmaker. And he was just trying to explain the process of evolution. And in order to do that, he wrote a computer program that allowed him to evolve designs without having knowledge of fundamentally how the designs were made or what the designs would end up being. And I read this book in the late 1980s and just remember this quote very well. Nothing in my biologist's intuition, nothing in my 20 years experience of programming computers, and nothing in my wildest dreams prepared me for what actually emerged on the screen. So it even surprised him. It turns out that an artist, William Latham, who was working at the Royal College of Art in the late 1980s, was doing exactly the same thing, but he wasn't using a computer, he was just enacting a process manually. So he was the computer. And of course, people are probably familiar with the term computer. It does actually date back to when women were employed to do mathematical calculations. They were referred to as computers. So Latham was the computer. He created this system that evolved forms that he couldn't design in his head. He started with a single form. He had a series of operations to sculpt, bend, or change them. He threw some dice, randomly mutated the form, and drew this incredible kind of family tree of forms and just presented it as artwork. And later on, he went on to work with computers and became very famous for this technique. This is one of his drawings from 1985. So to underline the process of evolution, I've got this very short video, very simple. It's showing you a legged figure that's been programmed to try and make it to walk. The interesting thing about this is that the people who wrote the program didn't know how to write a program to make the character walk, a bipedal simulation of a character trying to walk. So what they did was they constructed a simple neural network, allowed thousands of these individuals to try and get outside of the green circle. And the one that does the best job of getting outside the green circle is the winner. That breeds thousands of more children, and after about 20 generations, you end up with a figure that's able to walk really well. So the interesting thing about this for me is that the people who programmed this had no knowledge or understanding of how to actually write a program to do this. The machine evolved that behaviour for them. So it kind of did all the heavy lifting of working out all the weights of the network and so on. So as a young computer scientist and artist starting out in the world in the early 1990s, late 1980s, I read about all this stuff and I met William Latham. He came out to Australia, and I thought it was pretty amazing, so I thought I'll give it a go myself. So I ended up writing a system that does the equivalent of kind of pigeon breeding, or the way that people have worked with foods for centuries. Basically, breeding a whole series of forms, selecting the one that is most aesthetically pleasing or the most aesthetically ugly or whatever it is that you're trying to evolve for, and then just repeating that process over and over and over again until you end up with designs that you couldn't have imagined or designed just in your head. So I worked with very expensive computers at the time, and I was just lucky enough. That was what drew me to come to universities, because it was the only place you could go to get access to expensive computers, unless you were independently wealthy. So these computers used to cost quite a lot of money, but the amount of compute power that's in them today would easily be exceeded by a phone or a tablet or any computer device that you can carry in your pocket. So the basic principle is very simple. You start with a form. The form is encoded by a genetic programming language. So also at the time I was really interested in the theories of Noam Chomsky, universal grammars, and writing programming languages, which is a whole really interesting intellectual exercise in itself. So I was writing my own programming languages. This is one of them. It's very mysterious even to me, not because I don't know what everything means. It's just the way that you assemble things in the program language is done by the computer. So you start off with something, you spend hours and hours sitting in front of the screen, and it evolves into something completely different. So again, nothing prepared me for what emerged on the screen. I started off with something that was just a very simple sunflower, and suddenly it had two heads and tentacles coming off it and a funny ball thing sticking out of it. And if you'd asked me to design that or to work out the computer program, the digital DNA, if you like, that did that, it would have been impossible for me to do. But through this interactive process, I was able to evolve it. So I went on and evolved all sorts of weird and wonderful forms of artificial life, creatures that were grown from DNA but never existed. I spent 3 years doing that and created a whole interactive museum of unnatural history. Here's a very short segment. At the time that this was made, assistive computers were much slower, so it took hours and hours to create some images in frames. I spent years and years sitting in front of the computer waiting for it to generate this image. Now you can just have your phone. But every day was a surprise, because all of the things that they did, the behavioural characteristics, the way that they shake and quiver, none of that was programmed in correctly. They kind of emerged as this interactive evolutionary process. And I've been working with this system for the last 20 to 30 years. It still never ceases to amaze me what it's able to come up with. It uses this principle called database amplification, which allows you to have a very terse specification in the same way that DNA will fit on a USB stick, but it's able to create an incredible variety of flora and fauna that we observe on Earth, including us. You get all this complexity kind of coming into the design for free. You're able to incorporate models of birth and death as well. It's not just about making things that are kind of continuously growing. They also die as well. This was a commission for a billboard in Queensland. I have told the story many times before, but I always find it fascinating. When the billboard went up, because they put my name on it, people would contact me by email and ask me where I learnt to draw like that, and then I would write back and say, well, computer evolved it. I didn't really have anything to do with making the pictures apart from writing the code. And then they would get very aggressive and say that I was cheating and it wasn't allowed. And this is a more recent commission for the Ars Electronica Museum in Linz in Austria. Is basically taking the elements of oil company logos, because oil comes from plants in the Jurassic period. All of the plants that used to occupy the earth were all sort of crushed and turned it, and all the energy that they stored from sunlight was stored in their biology. And now, of course, we've been digging that up over the last couple of hundred years and polluting the planet at a fantastic rate. So these are all modelled on Australian flora, but all made with the elements of oil company logos. There's a picture of me looking at them. So I did a series of 50s of these, and again, just the idea of the sort of logo being this beautiful graphic element that you could suddenly genetically turn into something else was really fascinating. This is a short video. Oh, sorry, go back. This video will play. Yeah. Later work, this has been into the last couple of years, like 3 years ago, I think. Again, a series of places was commissioned for the station in Sydney, the station in Sydney. I looked at the plants that were displaced by the station hundreds of years ago, worked out the genetic code for them, evolved a new type of code, and grew the plants, and then slowly disintegrated them over a period of about 20 minutes. So it's very sort of slow, but it's a video installation. Use a kind of sort of requiem for nature, I guess, in a way of nature that's lost and destroyed. It's in Sydney. It's on with several other works. I think it was on last month or the month before. It's on again in early next year. They cycle the works through. But it's not just me who uses this technique. Lots of other people have used it. If you're interested in more practical applications, this is a design for a satellite boom holder. It was developed by a couple of engineers in the UK in the mid-1990s. If you asked any engineer to design a satellite boom holder, they would use the triangle because that's what engineers have taught us, the basic fundamental building block of structures that have a low weight and high rigidity. This is a completely different design, and it was designed using the evolutionary techniques that I just talked about. It's 20,000% better than the best human design. It looks strange. No designer would think that this was a good design. It looks weird, it looks ugly, it looks wrong, but it turns out that it's 20,000% better than the best human design at the time. Similarly, this is a very small but important spacecraft antenna that again was discovered by a similar technique. So if you'd asked any engineer to design something like this, they would never have thought of bending the wire in that weird kind of way. But what that illustrates to me is that there's a whole series of possibilities for human design, and these diagrams are not to scale. There's a whole lot of possibilities for evolutionary design. Some of those designs do fit within human design, but the bulk of them fit outside of human design. So it's a technique that is foreign to human design, and it creates things that often people think are counterintuitive or wrong, but turn out to be better if they have a particular purpose that they're designed for. But then there's this broader field of computational design, and it's deliberately fuzzy because the big question that I'm asking in the talk today is how big does this circle go? Does it encompass all of human design, or are there things that are uniquely human that will stay uniquely human that can't be simulated or replicated or subsumed by computational design? So you might be wondering, this sounds all great, you've been doing it for a long time, why isn't everyone working this way? Well, there's a whole lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is to do with the idea of control, agency and autonomy. So Maggie Bowden, who's a very famous figure in this area, particularly in relation to artificial intelligence and art and design, has this idea that there are two kinds of autonomy in systems. And those systems include human systems, computer systems, animal systems, every kind of system you can think about where you're considering autonomy. There's physical autonomy that is characterized by things like homeostasis and self-organization. So self-organization is a huge thing in biology and physics. It's the idea that the fundamental materials of the universe have self-organizational properties that cause them to go into particular configurations, and not only to go into those configurations, but to maintain those configurations. That's homeostasis. And again, this goes back to the cyberneticians like Ross Ashby, who I mentioned earlier, who are obsessed with this idea of homeostasis, which often you think from the name it means keeping everything the same, but it's actually keeping things the same with the perturbation of the outside world trying to change it. So actually you're reconfiguring things internally in a system to maintain a homeostasis, to maintain a membrane, to maintain a brain, to maintain a body. The second type of autonomy that Margaret Bowden characterises is what's sort of classically referred to as mental or intentional autonomy. And this is the kind of autonomy that most people in this room would probably equate with being human. The idea that you have a mental self and that you have intention, that your actions, the things that you do are intentional. It's very popular with Americans because they have that song where they sing about, I'm proud to be American, where at least I know I'm free. And that's the whole thing is, it's the basis of free will, right? The idea that we have the freedom to choose, the freedom to decide, not just in the small things, but the big things. And that's what separates us from everything else. All of these computer systems, all of the sort of simpler biological systems, and maybe it's a continuum too, so maybe primates have a degree of mental and intentional autonomy, and it's highly likely that they do. But there is this fundamental divide. So that brings us to the next part of the talk, which is really what I want to talk about, is this, the age that we're kind of in now, that has really come up very rapidly, the age of artificial intelligence. So for, of course, decades, this is from 1961, so philosopher G.H.R. Parkinson, writing in a very traditional way, thought he'd solved the big problem of computers being creative. There are no machines which can create art. It's possible to program a computer to produce a painting or a poem, but the program comes from outside the machine. All of the intention, all of that autonomy comes from the program and not from the program itself. And again, this idea has been challenged for decades and I think proven to be incorrect. So in the early 1980s, the artist Harold Cohen wrote this book, the first artificial intelligence colouring book, and Harold was a traditional artist. He was a painter. He represented the UK in the Venice Biennale in the 1960s. He had a chance to visit the lab of Ed Feigenbaum in the US and became interested in the concept of artificial intelligence, which was a very different concept than what people currently think of as AI. But he was fascinated with the idea of creating an artificially intelligent painter that could do his work for him. And he always used to sort of scoff that when I die, this program that I've called Aaron will be able to continuously keep making art. Ironically, now it exists only as a Twitter bot that produces paintings every couple of weeks, I think. I haven't looked at it recently. But Harold Cohen really trailblazed the idea that it was possible for a machine to be an independent artist, to create things independently. There's a lot of controversy surrounding how much autonomy went into the software that he wrote and the hardware that he built, but he did come to it from an artist's perspective. He didn't come to it from an engineer's perspective. And for him, the primacy of it being a program that he would be proud to call his artwork was the most important aspect of the work that he did. So this is Simon Colton, who works here in our lab, who kind of took up the mantle from Harold Cohen. But Simon's not an artist, he's a computer scientist, and he wanted to make an automated painter. So, because he's not here, it's easy for me to kind of bag his ideas, and he's a colleague, but I'm sure it'll come back to haunt me. This kind of approach to the idea of the artist as the lone hero and the machine becomes the lone hero, or the programmer who programmed the machine is the lone hero, is a very strong narrative that dates back in a lot of artificial intelligence research. And I think this is sort of similar. The idea that we can prove something by conquering the best human is a really strange way of thinking about human knowledge and things like that. Why is it that we want to make machines that beat the best human, and then we say, well, that's not what humans are really good at. So when machines bettered people at chess, people said, well, chess is just a game. It's highly kind of mathematical. It's not really what humans can do, other stuff that machines can't do. And so this argument just keeps perpetuating because people try and think of a whole idea of the I in autonomy as being something that you pass from you to a machine. And certainly I've been really interested in this idea too. This is a work from the early 2000s that has a whole series of virtual creatures that impinge on the real environment. They sense the presence of people in the space and create sound in order to keep people occupied in the space. And again, they learn this through evolution. It wasn't designed into the system. The other big thing is that if you're old enough to remember a time before the incredible permeation of technology into culture and society, there's been a huge change in the way that people experience the world, and it's now largely mediated through technology. And of course, artificial intelligence has really kept up with this. So in 2017, the New York Times published this article kind of proclaiming the second coming of AI and how AI is creating the building blocks to reshape music and art. So the reason for this, of course, is because this is big business now. So Silicon Valley had decided to try and invest in AI, not just to do all the things that we'll cover in a minute, but also to actually kind of conquer that last bastion is human creativity. If we can make a machine that is as creative or more creative than a human, then what is left in being human? So in the last couple of years, we've seen a huge influx of artificially intelligent machines that generate all the things that we used to ascribe to being the exclusive domain of humans, such as writing movie scripts, creating pop songs that are big hits, and even creating art that sells for large amounts of money. But if you peel back the hype, for example, this work, which was created by 3 French students, or they just graduated, who had no artistic backgrounds, but their backgrounds were more in marketing and machine learning. They created this painting, and they said it's the first painting made by an artificial intelligence, and they put it in a nice gold frame and sent it to Christie's, and it sold for $500,000 Australian dollars. It turned out that they, in fact, just copied the software from a 19-year-old programmer who'd interned at Google, and had put his software out open source. We downloaded the software in our lab. We managed to make our own versions in about 15 minutes. So it's really a great way to make money if you're first. Does anyone recognise this person? No one in the world has actually met this person because she doesn't exist. There's a website you can go to called This Person Does Not Exist, and you just type in your browser and you get a new person being generated every time. There's a couple of things that kind of give it away. If you look at the eyes, they look slightly wrong. If you look at the hair, it's a little bit weird, a little bit strange. But that's how good AIs are now at generating things. And of course, you can use them for all sorts of purpose, like if you're into spying or espionage, you can create fake accounts with fake people and make them look like they're real people and get people to friend you on social media and then basically use that as a vector for an attack. So the big problem, of course, as many people are aware, is that this rapid rise in AI is not without huge consequences. So it didn't take long for people to realize that all of the learning that these artificially intelligent algorithms get comes from us, comes from the people who subscribe to social media, who put their information online, who publish photos on all of the social media sites. All of that information has been scraped off and used for other purposes. And the bias in these sets has become apparent over the last couple of years, that they're largely white people. So recognising people who aren't white was a big problem for a lot of facial recognition systems. Controversially, Google released a system that classified African Americans as gorillas. So this technology is very powerful, but it's also very controversial. The other big problem that has been highlighted is that while machines are now competitive with humans in terms of recognition, so it's possible with a state-of-the-art artificially intelligent neural network to be better than most humans at recognising objects in an image, the machine has no semantic understanding. So everyone in this room understands about Marguerite's little joke, right? This is not an apple, this is not a pipe. But a machine just says, oh, that's an apple, that's a leaf, that's a frame. It has no deep semantic understanding of what's actually going on. And that's incredibly dangerous. The other big problem with AI is, and the media hype around AI is largely to do with the fact that people will be put out of work because AI will replace jobs. But if you actually drill down into what AI is and where it comes from, there's a huge amount of human labour involved in doing it. So this is a great piece of design. Unfortunately, it's very hard to see at this scale, but you can download a giant PDF and look at it in a lot of detail. It's basically the entire amount of resources, both human and material, that go into making an Amazon Alexa. So it goes all the way back to the minerals that are mined, largely often in third world countries where people are exposed to toxic chemicals and die prematurely because of that exposure, to all of the data that's gathered for free, to the hidden bias that's represented by the algorithms that isn't available to the public to choose or to change. So this whole idea of having this little device that sits on your desktop and you just go, hey Alexa, play me the latest song on iTunes or whatever, and it just does it for you. You're really drilling down into this whole ecosystem of human labour that's involved in producing just one of those devices. Of course, there are millions of them everywhere. And of course, again, the idea of surveillance capitalism has really become the predominant order of Western society, a new economic order that claims human experience as free raw material for hidden commercial practices of extraction, prediction and sales. So we're all working for Facebook, we're all working for Google, we're all working for Amazon, but we're not getting paid to do that. We're just receiving this kind of pleasurable experience that a lot of us tend to get immersed in very readily and very easily. And it does go back to that question of free will, right? So we think that, you know, we're proud to be Americans, or at least we know we're free, but are we that free when it's this easy to get manipulated? And because it's, I mean, people have for a long time have known what people like and what they want to do and how to make them do that. And the great thing is that they can make them do that without them even knowing that they're being made to do it. And of course, this is happening not just in a city or a town or a country, it's happening globally. Okay, but there is a bright side. So that's the bad side. There is a bright side. So we've been playing with this technology too, and this is a little bit of a joke application, but one of the people who works in our lab was very interested in contemporary art and would often go to art exhibitions, but was often bamboozled by some of the artwork. He just couldn't really understand what it was about. There's a famous case last year, I think, where some cheeky students put a pair of glasses in the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art and just left them there. And within about 10 minutes, people were coming and photographing it, and there were sort of bald, middle-aged men pontificating about the significance of a pair of glasses on the floor, about absence and loss, and sort of, you know, all these things. But it was just a joke. So we thought, can we put critics out of a job? So we extracted about 400,000 public domain art images. Ironically, Australia has hardly any public domain art images, so the collection of Australian art that resides in Australia is not available publicly under a non-commercial use license. But at least in America, where they're free, their art is free too. So most of the collection is drawn from the large art institutions in the US and in Europe. But we got 400,000 images of artworks, trained a neural net to recognise those artworks, and then built an app. So the training part is complicated and hard, but the app part is simple. So you can download this app, you point the app at a piece of art, and it will tell you how much it thinks it's art, and it will show you other artworks that are similar. So it has no semantic understanding of the work. So it can't give you the way a traditional critic would analyse an artwork, but it will tell you if it's art or not, based on its visual similarity. And it does uncannily well at working out what is art and what is not. So if it hasn't raised a few doubts in your mind about the significance of the way that humans understand art, that's the first point I'd like to make. But it's not meant to be seriously an art critic, but it's just a fun thing that you can download for free. The other area that we're working in more seriously is the idea of co-creation with artificial intelligence. So we've been working with UK artist Andy Lomas, who's very well known for his morphogenic forms. He has a system, a little bit like the stuff I showed you earlier that I've been working on, that has a kind of digital DNA that grows these a very sort of visceral brain or coral-like forms. Anyway, he has a system to do this. It's very laborious, just going through, because the parameters that he can change in the system have very little resemblance to what actually emerges on the screen. So he's basically kind of like shining a torch in the dark and trying to find the really interesting things, but it's very, very difficult. He spends thousands of hours in front of the computer. But the one good thing about that is that he didn't sort of just whittle away those hours unproductively. He grew all these forms, classified them, in terms of a rating, like how good he thought they were out of 10, and also gave them particular categories that are very unique and particular to his artistic style. So what we did was we went with him and we trained a neural net to recognise his style and his rating. So this is just specific to the individual. And it actually does a pretty good job. It's able to, with about 70% accuracy, to work out if you show an Andy Lomas form to the computer, it will give you a rating for it that's 70% accurate. If you go from a 0 to 10 scale to a 0 to 5 scale, it jumps up to about 85% accuracy, which is pretty good. So it's not quite as good as a human, but it's enough for the computer to go away and only show Andy the ones that he thinks he would rate in above, 7 to 10. So it's basically assisting him. It's not doing the work for him completely, but it's just reducing the amount of time he has to spend looking at things that he knows he's going to rate really lowly. The other thing that we managed to do was also work out the classifications and to take the very high-dimensional information that goes into building the form and put it into two-dimensional forms, which kind of develop this map. So all these dots represent individual forms and they're labelled around the edges. So you can see, for example, the ones that he labels black are all in a similar area on the outliers. He's got other ones that he labels mess, which are up the top. So what this is doing is basically trying to visualise a map of something that is incomprehensible directly, but is made comprehensible through data visualisation and machine intelligence. And we're still working with that, so it's early days, but it looks really promising. And so he's going to integrate it into his system and see if he can actually reduce the huge amount of time that he needs to spend working on that system. Another project, a PhD student of mine, Nina Radjic, has been working on. It's very different, but it's a mirror. This is an artificially intelligent mirror. It has a camera hidden behind it, and the camera looks at you when you look into the mirror, and it uses machine learning to work out your emotions, and it uses a very simple model that classifies it into 7 different emotional categories. But it then uses those emotions to generate a bespoke poem. So that each time you look into the mirror, the poem that you get is completely unique and original to you. And if you turn away from the mirror, the poem disappears from the mirror. If you turn back to the mirror, a new poem appears. Anyway, she's been testing this. The idea is to create an object, an artificially intelligent object, that is not like a helpful assistant or a pleasant person, but something that allows you to both literally and metaphorically reflect on your emotions. And it's been really uncannily, I think, quite interesting, the results that she's got. The poems are really fantastic. It's using a very advanced model called GPT-2 that is able to coherently generate poetry that does actually make sense to humans, even though no human was actually involved in writing the exact poem. She created a training set, a bespoke training set of a curated series of postmodern poems and horoscopes. And so the information or the poem that you get on the screen is quite uncannily it's kind of advising you about stuff, but because it's based on your emotion, the advice is much more targeted than a horoscope could ever be. And it's the sort of uncanny nature of the things that it comes up with is really interesting. So that's just a couple of examples of the uses of AI that perhaps aren't as negative as the warnings that I put up earlier. But I did want to come back just quickly and talk about these two kinds of autonomy, because in the original evolutionary systems I showed you, yes, there was no mental or intentional autonomy, and that's why they haven't replaced people, or that they haven't become a predominant way in which people think about design. But what about the second one? Are any of these systems impinging on this whole idea of mental or intentional autonomy? Well, I think clearly the answer is still no. But I'd like to raise another question and really question if it actually matters. So at the beginning of the talk, I talked about Descartes, and of course Descartes was sure that there must be as much reality in the cause as in the effect. He was really sure about that because all the evidence pointed to it. The way the world seemed to work made sense that way. And the way that the world makes sense now to us does kind of seem to make sense this way, but I don't think it's a fait accompli. I think maybe in 50 to 100 years' time, we may be questioning the whole idea that mental and intentional autonomy is really necessary to do the things that we think are uniquely human, to design, to be creative. That's still open. Okay, just to kind of finish off on a more negative note, there's obviously very pressing problems. So hopefully no one in this room would dispute any of the facts of climate science, that we really have a very short period of time to address problems that we probably won't end up addressing. So that's led to a new research program for me that looks at the interaction between the intelligence of nature, the intelligence of the world, and the intelligence of machines, and trying to hybridize those things. So many people who work in design and architecture know that biomimicry has been around for a long time, and it's being debated as being both a useful thing and both a negative thing. So I just pulled sort of two random papers here from the last 20 years that speak both positively and negatively about the idea of biomimicry. But to me, biomimicry seems to be a one-way process. It's about humans learning from nature and taking from nature, which is fundamentally what we've done throughout our history. But maybe it's time to actually give back to nature in a way. So again, I've been very influenced by the writings of Maturana and Varela, who, you know, they wrote a lot of their really interesting work about autopoiesis in the 1980s, 1990s. The two really interesting things are the idea of enactive interfaces that allow the transmission and organisation of knowledge through action, and structural coupling, so that an organism is not a distinct object, it's structurally coupled to its environment, which again is nothing very surprising, but it's completely the antithesis, the way that a lot of engineers have thought about the idea of machine intelligence. So a couple of years ago with SensiLab at Melbourne Uni, we edited a special issue on this idea of post-anthropocentric creativity, the idea that there exists a whole range of creative possibilities that aren't human-centred or human-oriented, or that don't come from humans. And of course, at the beginning of the talk, I showed you natural systems and the whole idea that nature is a kind of creative system, and it's a non-teleological system. That is, it doesn't have a designer in charge of what gets designed, it just designs. And so, you know, there's fantastic artworks like Tim Noel's tree drawings, where he places pens on trees and gets the wind to just blow the pens and creates these really interesting patterns. And of course, the patterns vary according to the species of tree and the environmental conditions. So there is this sort of structural coupling between the organism and the environment. And of course, growing up in Australia, for me, and seeing the rapid loss of species and destruction of our natural environment is obviously really concerning, but it's also, you know, there's so much inspiration that you can get from nature. Nature is an incredible builder. So we can ask the question, can we kind of harness the building power of natural systems of nature itself, rather than just mimicking it? Can we turn eusocial insects into 3D printers, for example? And that requires the whole idea of surrendering the notion of superiority of human design or human control. So this is a great work by Spela Petric. She's an artist who is very interested in this sort of new relationship between humans and nature. It's a performance work she did where she stands motionless for 18 hours and casts a shadow on the grass that's growing, and it leaves this beautiful imprint where her shadow was. It's kind of about building up this long-term connection with nature. So just recently we've been working to try and see if we can hybridize artificial intelligence, human intelligence and biological intelligence. And I do make the distinction between human intelligence and biological intelligence, fully cognizant of the idea that, of course, we're all part of biology as well. But, you know, there are certain reasons to separate human intelligence from. So can we actually not design using inspiration from nature? Can we design in collaboration with nature? So I've been working with some great PhD students and postdocs, and Roland supervising Natalie, Paolo and Camillo. So we've been working with the idea of the material intelligence that's built into growing systems and hybridizing that with robots. So there's a demonstration in the room just over the corridor there. What we've been trying to do is create robots that work very slowly, that try to nurture and grow plants. And these are very early experiments, but we've actually been able to get the robot to plant seeds, to grow the seeds, to water the plant and support the plant and nurture the plant. And the next big step, I think, is really getting the robot to love the plant, not just to be a machine that's supporting the plant. This is great for me to get up here and talk about, but I have a whole team of people who help me, and, you know, it's not easy to do. We design custom electronics that has a whole series of sensors to sense what the plant is doing, it to control syringes to insert things into the plants and to look at how they're growing and so on. Yeah, so it's an exciting project, I think, in terms of future possibilities, that robots are always thought of as being this kind of mechanical thing that's of human design, that look human, But when we think about artificial intelligence, that's not the way that artificial intelligence is conceived technically. It doesn't have a body, it doesn't need a body. It sits on server racks all over the world and sort of quietly looks at human patterns and tries to discern information from those patterns. And I think that idea is fundamentally open to a whole lot of really dangerous exploitations, a lot of which we're seeing now, and that we really need to try and reconnect the whole idea of what intelligence is with the other kinds of intelligence that exist in the world. So I'll kind of conclude there and just, so it's a very, very interesting and kind of ironic way to finish that we're now constructing these incredibly elaborate virtual worlds and virtual spaces at the cost of the natural world and the world that we evolved in, the world that we used to look after, but now has become this incredible resource that we've just plundered. So I think it really calls for a fundamental change in the way that we think about technology and the way that we deploy technology. So to answer the question that I began with, will there be design without designers? Well, I think the short-term answer is no, there won't be. Nobody's going to lose their job, but the nature of the way that people design will fundamentally change over the next 10 years because of these technologies.